So Charter, as you can see here, stands for cultural heritage actions to refine training, education, and roles. It's pretty much all encompassing, it's geared towards pretty much encompassing the whole cultural heritage sector. Next slide, please. Can you? Yeah. Here's the project mission. No, sorry. Yeah. This is what we are doing. This is our job in Charter. We are here to protect, promote, and enhance cultural heritage, both tangible as well as intangible. And we are doing this, and the sections that are underlined in this slide now, by working on a sectoral skills strategy, bridging the gaps between education and occupational system and employer needs, and proposing new training and curricula. Those underlined sections, these are actually central elements of all blueprint projects. I have a link here for you if you want more information on blueprints, but to define them in a very simple manner, these are projects for certain sectors, which the EU considers to be important to take a closer look at. And then in the calls, they will mention the sectors for which they are calling for applications for blueprint projects. Here is what I'm working in work package 3 in Charter. And this is about education and training, work package 3. And this, so I'm not now talking not about, no, sorry. Stay with the slide I was at. Yeah, stay with this slide, please, for a while. What I wanted to say is I'm not talking now about the whole Charter project, but only about the work package that I am working in, that I have been working in for the past 2 years. What we are doing in work package 3 is, or what we have done so far, we have mapped education and training programs. So we've looked at what's there, what is there in terms of education and training for cultural heritage professionals. We have created a database of educational training programs, which will go public. It's been open for Charter partners for a while, for over a year now, but it will go public in the coming weeks, so look out for that. And our first deliverable was precisely about this mapping. We've looked at what are the classification criteria, what is education and training for cultural heritage in Europe like, and what basically are the paths to qualifications in this sector. I've added the links here. This deliverable has been published, and you can look if you are interested in that. Our second deliverable was about studying and identifying and analyzing innovative and emerging curricula. What makes innovative and emerging training and education programs in cultural heritage? That was our question, and we've tried to answer it in a deliverable that also has already been published. Our third deliverable was about quality standards and validation and certification. That is an important aspect for all education programs, but validation and certification are particularly important for non-formal or informal education. That does not concern those of you who come from higher education, but for vocational education and training, which is an important part for the cultural heritage sector. In some countries, a lot of this training still takes place in non-formal or even informal contexts, mainly in the fields of traditional crafts, which of course are so important for cultural heritage. We then looked at gaps and needs in cultural heritage education and training. This deliverable is currently under being reviewed, so it will go online probably, say, in the next months or so. We have also, what we've also done is worked at or assembled a literature collection on our topic, education and training for cultural heritage, which is also online on the Charter homepage. And finally, this is what we are working on now. We are working on guidelines for innovative and emerging curricula in the field. The next slide, please. Could you change to the next slide?
Sorry, it's just taking a little longer.
Okay, don't worry. The next slide, what it's going to be, it's our preliminary findings. I don't want to talk about results yet because that's too early, but these are preliminary findings of, again, work package 3. I've mentioned this before that cultural heritage education and training encompasses not just higher education, but to a large degree, actually to the largest degree, it's vocational education and lifelong learning. Any kind of learning or training that takes place after your initial degree or initial qualification are very, very important in this field as well. And the other thing that makes cultural heritage education and training complex, not necessarily complicated, but complex, is the fact that it encompasses formal learning. That is, if you have a formal degree at the end of your education. Informal learning, which is when you take a course, for instance, at a private institution. I don't mean a higher education program, but a shorter course, where you won't have an official degree or an official qualification at the end. Nevertheless, you will have learned, presumably, a lot of things during that course. And informal learning, which takes place sometimes not even in an active or conscious manner, but concerns cultural heritage, again, for instance, in many of the traditional crafts, for instance, working with textiles. Things like this get transmitted very often in the families and not even in any outside education courses, but play an important part for our sector. Because education and training in cultural heritage is so complex, it's important that everybody, as far as possible, and that mainly means education providers, but also whole education systems, use transparency tools. And by that, I mean the use of ECTFs, of quality assurance mechanism, for the vocational education sector, ECVET, describing the outcomes of a learning process via learning outcomes, as assigning levels of the European qualification or the national qualification. All these transparency tools need to be used consistently. They are particularly important for recognition and validation of certification. In particular, again, when it concerns informal or non-formal learning. When it comes to gaps and needs, we have, of course, identified quite a few of them, but probably the three that we spoke most about, I mentioned here. The first field are professions that foster community engagement for diverse societies, making cultural heritage accessible to all. The second field is about sustainability in built heritage and landscape. Europe is a continent with many very old buildings. They need to be conserved, they need to be restored. It's important, not just for cultural heritage, but for reaching the climate goals, to make sure that this takes place in a sustainable manner. This is a fairly new field. This is where we identified a training need and a training gap. And finally, what we called cultural heritage in digital environments. That is any kind of digital tools, any kind of digital applications and their use in cultural heritage.